Um, and share the screen.
Yeah, she is.
And we'll ask all our online guests, please, to mute yourselves. Feedback. Jimi Hendrix is here. So our speaker tonight is Bonnie Witskill. And Bonnie has been a member of the club for a long time. She is our refreshments committee chair. So on the monthly meeting nights when we have our guest speakers, we come back to the observatory and there are wonderful refreshments and tea and coffee, and that's what Bonnie does. She also is responsible for this display cabinet on the west wall, which she changes periodically, including just now. So this is a brand new display about rain on other worlds. On other worlds, it doesn't always rain water. Sometimes it rains other more interesting things like rubies. And Bonnie has been a member for over 50 years of AAI. She writes articles for our quarterly newsletter.
Which is really good because she's only 45 years old.
That's kind of amazing. She writes articles on in utero astronomy, for our newsletter, which is called the Asterism, and has given lots and lots of presentations over the years. And tonight's presentation, as you can see, is on moon time. So without further ado, Bonnie Witskill.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's standing room only. It's quite amazing.
Bonnie, get the mic in front of your mouth.
That's what was causing all the noise before. Is this better? No? Well, I don't know how to work this thing. So, John, can you come and rescue me, please?
I will do my best. Let's see. I think the problem is that probably the mic is too close to the speaker. So maybe if you see, when you get close to the actual unit, so lift it closer. Yeah. So maybe you can put that somewhere like lower, or just put the
this thing.
Yeah.
This thing.
Right.
Oh.
Why don't we just try it that way? And then if you move, you can just.
Is this okay?
Yeah. Or if you want, I will work the slides.
Oh.
I'm the AV guy.
Okay. Okay, can everybody hear me? I hope, yes, okay. Tonight, you're going to be treated to a topic that's sort of controversial. This is about a planetary plan to try and coordinate time on the moon with time on Earth. Now, this is sort of a controversial topic and sort of a tricky topic. So I'll try to explain it as simply as I can. So bear with me. Okay? Okay. To quote the song, does anybody really know what time it is? Yes. I'll keep going. Over the eons. Okay. Does anybody really know what time? Yay! Thank you, John. Does anybody really know what time it is? Over the eons, people have tried to measure time in different ways. They've used Greenwich Mean Time, Eastern Standard Daylight Savings Time, the Space-Time Continuum, British Summertime, Sidereal Time, Ragtime, Coordinated Universal Time, Howdy Doody Time. That last one, folks, some of you younger people can just Google that and find out what that means. Okay. Dateline. April 2nd, 2024, the White House and the Office of Science and Technology, they decreed that we have to have NASA establish a unified standard of time for the moon and other celestial bodies. And they have to get this ready for the end of 2026. Okay. Now, that's going to be a very tricky situation because most countries on Earth use solar time, which is defined by the motion of the sun in the sky. It also depends where you are on Earth. And we complicate things by having time zones. And some of the time zones aren't even 1 hour apart. Some countries use 30-minute time zones. So some countries are off by 30 minutes compared to others. So it does get complicated. Now, can we do that? Can we put a complicated Earth time zone method on the moon? That might get tricky. But just to remind you, this is the time zones of the Earth. There should be 24 time zones, but some of them, like I said, don't go from hour to hour. Some are off by a half hour. Some go on Eastern daylight savings time, some do not. So it's going to get very complicated very quickly. Okay. Coordinated universal time would not work on the moon. We use this to measure time on Earth. We go by hundreds of atomic clocks and we take the average time, and that's what time, universal time is. But then, of course, we keep adding leap seconds here and there to match the movements of the planets and to match the movements of the planets compared to the sun. But if you try to do this on the moon, you would see that the moon does not move in the same coordination as the Earth. If you had a clock on the moon, a clock on the Earth, the clock on the moon would lose 58.7 microseconds compared to the Earth. And why is that? Because the time moves faster on our moon than on Earth. And that is because the moon is smaller. It has less gravity. The moon's gravity is weaker. So the movement of any celestial body is determined by its mass and how it moves around its star. So because the Earth is more massive and bigger than the moon, we have a different time frame than the moon. Okay. Now we're off by a couple of microseconds compared to the moon. But even microseconds would count. If you see on the illustration, 1 Earth day is roughly 24 hours. But 1 day on the moon is like 29 and a half Earth days. Oh, not yet. We have, if we are, excuse me, if we are coordinating Earth time and moon time, we have to get very, very specific, especially for communication or tracking probes or for navigation or for moving people and equipment back and forth from the moon to the Earth. Okay. A day on the Earth's moon lasts about 29 and a half Earth days. Now, if you remember, if you look at the moon, you'll see that what we would call the man in the moon, the face of the man in the moon on the moon. The man in the moon's face will always face Earth because the moon is locked into Earth's gravity. The moon is so close to the Earth that the moon doesn't rotate on an axis. it revolves. Yes, it revolves. It revolves around the Earth. But the face of the moon, which happens to have the man in the moon face, it will always face our planet. That's why the moon's day is 29 and a half Earth days. It doesn't rotate like we do on our axis. And you have to keep all this into consideration when you're trying to measure time on the moon and coordinate it to the home planet. Okay. There have been talks about how to coordinate moon time and Earth time. When we get there, it will be called coordinated lunar time. We have to have this time to communicate between spacecraft and Earth and satellites in moon orbit and astronauts and future lunar bases and future perhaps manufacturing colonies on the moon. They'll have to synchronize all their time and all their communications. It's going to be tough. And of course, it's just in the talking stage. People don't know if they're going to have one time zone on the moon or multiple time zones on the moon. Whatever time they decide to coordinate, it will be used in cislunar space. Cislunar space. Now, what is that? That's the region around Earth that extends from the moon and past the moon's orbit. It would cover the moon's surface, anything in orbit, and any of the Earth-Moon points where you could launch a satellite above the moon and communicate with Earth. Okay. This LTC would only be used in cislunar space. It's the region around the moon that extends around the moon and past its orbit, and any place that we would use a satellite to bounce a signal from the moon to the satellite to Earth and back. Like I said, this is going to get really tricky. The man in the moon, the face in the man in the moon, always faces Earth because of the strong gravity of Earth compared to the weaker gravity of the moon. The moon is locked. It does not rotate like in 24 hours like the Earth does. It's locked. It will orbit around the Earth. It's also called a synchronous rotation. It says one hemisphere constantly faces the larger partner, so the face of the moon, the man in the moon face, will constantly face the Earth. And while I'm on that subject, you've all seen the man in the moon, the craters that make the man in the moon face. That part that faces the moon will always, that part of the moon that always faces Earth will always face Earth. But the back side of the moon, people call it the dark side of the moon. It is not the dark side. It is just the far side. Because you may not see back here behind the moon, but it's lit. It's lit by the sun. So it's never dark. It's just that you can't see it. So if you ever hear anybody refer to the dark side of the moon, they are talking about the music, the song. If you refer to it in science or in astronomy, it's the far side of the moon. Okay? Okay. There, here's the example. The part of the moon that has the face with the man in the moon always faces Earth. It will constantly face Earth. It is rotating around the Earth at the same speed that it rotates around its own axis. So it will always face Earth. We rotate 24 hours or so, but the moon doesn't rotate. But it does. Somebody just leaned on the light. Thank you. So the face of the moon will always rotate around the Earth, like that. So if we ever have bases on the far side of the moon, again, it'll be kind of tricky to put a time zone back there to coordinate with a time zone on Earth. Go ahead. And you want to put a time zone on Earth? You have 24 time zones. And you have like how many countries on this planet? And nations have been using their own different times to coordinate with their own space probes. For example, NASA uses mission elapsed time. That means they go from the launch to the splashdown, or at least that's how they did it during the Apollo missions. Okay. Now, lunar time zones is all about ensuring the success of future multinational missions to the moon. So everybody seems to be in agreement. We need to have some sort of way to coordinate time on the moon with Earth. And it's not just the US going back to the moon. We are going with our Artemis partners, 36 other nations. And of course, they're spread all around the globe. They have different time zones than the US. We have to figure out a way where we can talk to everybody at the same time. It will not be easy. And it's not just the USA talking about setting up time zones on the moon. Excuse me. The ESA, European Space Research and Technology Center, had a meeting to discuss how to place time on the moon and sync it with Earth time. Okay. One of the big plans is to make a telecommunications service. They're trying to get private companies to support this venture, figure out how to make atomic clocks, or perhaps have a think tank to figure out the best way to do this. All right. We have to talk to each other, and a lot of companies would have to talk to each other back and forth from moon colonies to the Earth, because we're going to have water extraction and mining and maybe even military. DARPA has asked 14 companies to explore commercial lunar activities and to figure out how they're going to talk to each other in unison. Okay. ESA came up with two ideas. They think they can't decide whether lunar time should be set on the moon and the moon have its own time or synchronized with Earth time. But they did come up with two thoughts. The first method would be based on the time on the moon's revolution. Because like I said, a moon's day is 29 and a half days, 29 and a half Earth days, and the same side of the moon faces the Earth. The second method would be synchronizing moon time with Earth time. And here's where it gets tricky. For example, if it's 12 a.m. in London, it's 5:30 a.m. in New Delhi. Let's say Great Britain sends a moon probe. India sends a moon probe. They land successfully. Okay. What time are you going to use? Great Britain's time or India's time? Or would it depend on who sent the probe? Great Britain would talk in London time, and India would talk in New Delhi time. And perhaps they'd have to synchronize each other on Earth, or even the two probes would talk to each other on the moon. But they have to know, especially if it has to do with getting astronauts there, or doing water extractions or mining and sending not just information, but sending pieces or samples off the moon to the factories on Earth. That gets very, very tricky. Would moon time be ahead or behind the Earth? Because don't forget, we have 24 time zones, 15 degrees apart. We have lots and lots of countries who would like to be in charge of this. So it gets very, very tricky. Right. Okay. Yes, they did propose something they called a lunar net. They would have satellite navigation around the moon, satellite navigation around Earth, and the satellites would talk to each other and be very precise in what time they talk or what time they program to have things done on Earth and the moon. NASA is also developing some sort of lunar communication relay satellite system. They're trying to, and they would have to coordinate both systems. So everybody uses the same time scale to talk to each other at the same time. It's going to get crazy up there. Yeah. Okay. We have to talk to each other because this is what will work with our Artemis program and our Gateway or orbital station. We've got automatic probes and manned missions, and they all have to interact with each other. And the timing is, if you just land a probe on the moon, that's fine. But if it has to be there at a certain time, at a certain location, and get ready to communicate with another colony on the moon, then it gets very tricky. Everything has to be very precise. So Earth time and moon time have to not match each other. They'll never match each other. But they'll have to coordinate and make sure that the timing is precise. And it'll get very complicated if you have too many groups or too many governments trying to use their own system. We could use GPS or Skype via satellites, put satellites on orbit around Earth and around the moon, and these relays could provide navigation and telecommunications. And they could talk to the probes or any moon explorers. And the ESA is starting to develop a satellite constellation. Now that's nasty for astronomers. Because I know that we have Starlink, which is very nice. You can communicate on Earth, but with Starlink, you see them go across, and they ruin a lot of photographs, celestial photographs, because you see what look like little stars across photographs, and it's very hard to take pictures without getting a satellite or 2 or 3 or 30 in one photo. So that's really tough for astronomers. But they're experimenting with all kinds of plans to develop a satellite constellation over Earth that could communicate with satellites that are going around the moon. And, of course, the IAU had to get in there too. Oh yeah. They're trying to collaborate for the moon timekeeping standard. You remember the IAU? Sure you do. They demoted Pluto. Yeah. Okay. To make this happen, NASA needs to consult with 36 other nations. They're the ones that signed the Artemis Accords. But of course, China and Russia did not. And they will be sending probes to the moon, and maybe they'll be sending astronauts, cosmonauts, taikonauts. Maybe they'll even be sending manufacturing to the moon. So we have to communicate with them. And they really should be part of the Artemis Accords, but so far they're not agreeing to sign the papers. Okay. NASA has to work with different departments in the U.S. government to create and implement measurements for the lunar time zone. So all the governments have to get involved and make this happen. Another suggestion would be to put on an ensemble of clocks, atomic clocks on the moon to help set up this time zone. But remember, any clock on the moon will run faster because less gravity. They'll run faster on the moon than on Earth. So you have to keep that in mind too. All right. Astronomers are still in the early days of determination how lunar time will tick. A lot of people are saying that the community has realized that this needs to be done sooner or later, especially with the Artemis Accords. And we want to get to the moon and Mars. We'll have to all be on the same page with the same time. Okay. Now, it's going to get tricky. I'm worried about this thing. I shouldn't be.
It's fine, just, you know.
All right. Whatever time system we have, it has to have traceability or a calculated connection to Earth's coordinated universal time. It should also have specificity and accuracy to measure very short spans of time for precise study and for spacecraft landing. It should be self-sufficient in case we lose communication between Earth and the moon. And it should be scalable in case we want to use it to go to Mars or other celestial bodies. It will be complex. Politically, I'm afraid it won't be easy because many countries have to agree on what kind of time frame they're going to use. Mechanically, it won't be easy because the Earth and the moon, they rotate differently. One is bigger, one is smaller, the gravities are different. Science, there's a lot of science involved in there. Military forces, Space Force, and other services must coordinate with operations on both bodies. Commercially, it won't be easy. You're going to have moon-based colonies and companies that produce things on the moon, and they'll have to send them back to Earth, or maybe the different colonies will have to communicate with each other. And whose time frame do they use? Earth time? Moon time? It'll be very complex. I hope I taught you something tonight. Now, before I close, I'd like to thank a few people. Mary Duca, who you saw on the screen before, my husband Al, and a couple of wonderful websites along the way. Okay? One more. And don't forget, folks, to achieve great things, 2 things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. Yeah. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions?
It's not so much,
I'm sorry, Will, you don't have.
I was going to say, it's not so much a question as just to add an extra level of layer rather of how crazy this will get.
Yeah.
Because we're used to 24-hour days. Can you imagine trying to live with sun rotation at 29
Andre Rapid.
Sure.
days, right?
Yeah.
Say hours.
I guess it would be like being in Antarctica during the summer,
I think it'd be worse.
with 24 hours of sun.
Yeah.
Yes, question.
So that means that it's gonna be possible to make time on the moon.
The tricky part will be coordinating time on Earth. the time on the moon. Because like she said, moon's one day is 29 days. You'd have those 29 days of sunlight. No, that's right, you would, but just have 29 days before the moon moves around in the same place. So one day
To get back to noon.
to get back to noon. It's going to be very tricky.
Yeah.
Everybody on Earth is going to have to give up Earth time and make a new time frame to satisfy the moon, I'm guessing,
I'm guessing too.
because the moon is neutral. Nobody's there yet. So we have to make ourselves coordinate with our standards to match the moon's rotation. Yes.
I'm assuming that the sun is visible from all the planets.
Yes, of course, from Pluto, it's very, but yes.
Well, I was thinking maybe we should base the time on the sun rather than either the moon or the earth. Because the sun is visible from all the planets, so as you go out to Mars and Titan and all the other places we plan to go, that might be one way.
The orbits would be slower and slower. The further you get out,
Right.
they move slower and slower. And the rotation is different too. I think Mars, we have 24 hours, roughly 24 hours. And I think Mars is 30 minutes more each day from Mars. So it's 24 and
Right, but it would
hours,
be
30
just the
minutes.
sun. The sun rotates, and we would just make it for the sun.
But it would be confusing for people who were hypothetically based on Mars, where like the same time of the day was at a different time of the day each day relative to what you're experiencing on the planet. Like at midnight, a few days later, the sun is suddenly up in the middle of the sky. You know, it's so.
It's
That's
a big
true.
challenge, because there's the technical thing where you could probably come up with any kind of crazy thing and computers could do the math, but the aspect of making it human.
Well, just be an app on your cell phone that'll
Yeah.
tell you what
Oh, yeah.
time it is. Or, you know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wherever you get to.
I know for a fact that when we send probes to Mars, the people at JPL, especially during Spirit and Opportunity, the two rovers,
Mhm.
were now stationary on Mars, but when they were moving and viable, I know for a fact JPL, people who were in charge of them were 4 watches:
Oh my God.
Earth time, Spirit time, Opportunity time, and a Fitbit. So they could keep track of what time it was, wherever Spirit and Opportunity happened to be.
Right,
Yeah,
that
Wow.
might be, yeah.
yeah.
I just would add to that they didn't call them days, right? They used the word
Sols.
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 Right, so that
That's right. That's right.
Which is kind of to your point about the sun.
Yeah.
except that it was tracking the
Except it's-
sunrise on
Correct,
Mars.
correct.
Right,
Yep,
so-
yep.
In fact, a long time ago, I did a talk about how a watchmaker made a watch to keep track of Mars time. Because JPL wanted it, they went to a different couple of watchmakers, and they got laughed out of the building. Except for one man who said, gee, you know, that would be interesting. And he went to work and he did it. I got that.
Any other questions
Yeah, I have.
Now, I'm afraid to walk over.
from our online people?
I'm afraid to walk over there and ask.
Bob?
Yeah, Bonnie, did anybody take into account asking the man on the moon what he thinks about all this?
He's too busy eating green cheese.
Oh,
And he probably,
Very
he
good.
probably speaks a different language.
oh, all right. Well, that answers that right there.
Good show, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yeah, very good, Bonnie.
Oops. All right, I'm gonna
John,
stop
I hate
recording.
this thing. I'm sorry, I hate this.
Turn it off, bud.
I'm trying to find the off button.
I'll get it.
Hey, John, how many people